Hello and welcome back. I recently rewatched the extended editions and the appendices of The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, and I just wanted to record my thoughts about this one. For those that don't have these box sets, this one has 12 discs and this one has 15 discs. So yeah, I've been busy. The last couple of months have been very NZ heavy actually. I've been watching a lot of New Zealand films and TV shows and podcasts, so yeah, it's been great. But anyway, if I were to summarise this particular video, I would say, please stop being mean about The Hobbit because it has a special place in my heart and you're hurting my feelings. I will defend this trilogy with my life, so here we go. I will try to keep this short and concise, but we'll see how it goes. Two of the main challenges they faced were the fact that one, they didn't have a lot of time in terms of pre-production. It was basically non-existent for the third film, but they had years and years for The Lord of the Rings. And two, Peter Jackson stepped in as director quite late. He was obviously involved in other capacities, but not as a director initially. Guillermo del Toro was originally supposed to direct it, and I think most of us can agree that del Toro and Jackson have very different styles, so I think maybe if they went ahead with him as a director, the two trilogies might have felt disjointed and not like one continuous story. While it would have been interesting to see what another director could offer, I reckon that ultimately it's a world and a story that we have associated with Peter Jackson, and I'm happy that he decided to do it in the end. That being said, the two trilogies have very different vibes. Lord of the Rings is grittier and more realistic, as realistic a fantasy film can be, whereas The Hobbit is more whimsical, magical and lighter. The Hobbit was also supposed to be 2 films, and it was only after they had started filming that they decided to make it into 3, so the scripts had to be rewritten while they were filming. A criticism we've seen quite a lot is why they decided to make a children's book into 3 films when it could have been told in 1. This is a bit of a controversial opinion, but I usually love the films more than the books when it comes to adaptations. I don't think I can visualise it that well in my head when I'm reading it, and I find films a lot more enjoyable because I can see the story and I can hear it as well, which is equally important. I think the voice the actors give to the characters, the score, the sound effects, everything helps to make it real, and I don't get that from the books, unfortunately. So while I love and have so much respect for Tolkien's work, I do prefer the 6 films over the 4 books, and I'm quite happy with most of the things they added or expanded on. And I also do like that symmetry, 3 and 3. I don't think The Hobbit would have worked as well as 1 or even 2 films. Those are just a couple of examples, but given the number of challenges they faced while making The Hobbit, I think they did a tremendous job. If they had adequate time for all departments to prepare for all 3 films, it would have been incredible. So the fact that they pulled it off with that many setbacks, I just have to respect that because it sounded incredibly stressful. I really like Martin Freeman as Bilbo Baggins. I do see quite a bit of myself in his Bilbo, and I think he was great. Sir Ian McKellen is back as Gandalf, of course. He did have a bit of a hard time with the green screen, bless him, but hopefully he enjoyed the entire experience in the end. Richard Armitage was excellent as Thorin. It breaks my heart that he thought he was going to get fired, and that's why he was avoiding the cameras and he wasn't in a lot of the behind the scenes footage at the beginning. So Richard, if you're watching this, I know that you know this by now, but you were great, and here's me as Thorin because I love him very much. I also need to mention Andy Serkis, who is an extraordinary artist. He didn't just play Gollum in this trilogy, he was also the director of the second unit, and I just really admire his dedication and work, so shout out to Andy. And then of course the dwarves. It's so lovely to see how close they became and how many of them are still in touch more than a decade later. Same with the actors from Rings, it just warms my heart to see such strong connections and friendships. So yeah, similar to the Rings appendices, I really enjoyed all the footage with the actors. It was so funny, and I'm just so happy to see that they had such a lovely experience filming this trilogy. I just find it really moving hearing them talk about it. Now, I'm not saying that you have to watch the extended editions and all the appendices to like or appreciate the films. You shouldn't have to anyway. But for me, watching that is just as enjoyable as watching the films, if not more. Watching the appendices truly shows how much work went into those films. Peter Jackson's schedule sounded insane. I'm not sure if that man got any rest at all for like 2 years straight. I really appreciate the insight, and I always get emotional when I watch the Appendices because I just love films and I love watching how they were made. Especially big films like Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit that were filmed back to back over a very long period of time, because you can see the bond between those people and you can see the amount of care and detail that went into this project. Watching The Hobbit Appendices felt like reuniting with family in a way, because so many of the crew who worked on Rings were back for The Hobbit, and I've watched hours and hours of these people showing and talking about their craft that I almost feel like I know them. So yeah, I could watch that stuff forever, seeing how they made the costumes, the sets, the props, the wigs, the prosthetics, the dialect and movement coaching. I love it all. I think for me The Hobbit will always have a special place in my heart because I was too young to watch Lord of the Rings at the cinema, but I did watch The Hobbit in 3D, 24 frames per second, 48 frames per second, Dolby Atmos, basically everything that was available in my city. I watched each one of them at least 5 times at the cinema in December 2012, 2013 and 2014. I got to connect with other fans online, and we also had the production vlogs by Peter Jackson on YouTube throughout the year as well, and I love that stuff. So yeah, I have very fond memories of that time. In terms of favourites, I think my favourite film is the first one, An Unexpected Journey. It's pure comfort, especially the first half. So yeah, it's magical, it's beautiful, it's fun, I love it. And my top 3 dwarves are Balin, Thorin and Dwalin, probably in that order. Were there things I didn't particularly like? For sure. I didn't care much about the Keeley Tauriel romance. I think maybe the CGI was a bit too much sometimes. There's also something a bit off with the colours in the second and third films, like a bluish tint or somewhat blurry. I'm not really sure how to describe it, but there is something. It's one of the reasons it gives that feeling of whimsy and fantasy I mentioned at the beginning, so I don't really hate it, it's just different. So yes, there are things I'm not crazy about, but I think these films get a ridiculous amount of unnecessary hate. So in conclusion, is The Hobbit as good as The Lord of the Rings? Perhaps not. I think we shouldn't compare them, but I do understand that it's inevitable. I think it's a very good trilogy that was created with love, care and hard work, and everyone involved should feel proud. These are just a few of my thoughts because I get a bit sad when I see people hating on these films, so hopefully this video will attract those who love them. Once again, thank you so much for listening to me talk about things I enjoy, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye!